Zixthala's 6 eyes focused on the holographic display floating above her workstation. The blue light cast strange shadows across her gray, scaled face as she worked through the daily routine that had kept her busy for the past 15 years. As the chief archivist of the Galactic Council, she handled thousands of species registration updates, trade route verifications, and diplomatic protocols every cycle. Today felt no different from any other day aboard Convergence Prime, the massive space station that served as the galaxy's political heart. The station housed representatives from 847 different species, all working together to maintain peace across the known galaxy. Ships came and went through the docking bays like insects around a flower, carrying diplomats, traders, and travelers from countless worlds. The Veltiari had always been perfect for archival work. Their methodical nature and excellent memory made them ideal record keepers. Zixthala took pride in her accuracy and attention to detail. In 15 years of service, she had never made a significant error. She pulled up the next file in her queue, a routine verification for the species known as humans. They had joined the Council only 37 standard cycles ago, making them one of the newest members. Their representatives were polite enough, though they seemed oddly energetic compared to most species. They asked many questions and showed curiosity about everything, which some of the older Council members found mildly amusing. The humans had submitted their homeworld designation as Earth, using their primitive language system. Standard protocol required cross-referencing all planetary names with the ancient archive, a vast database containing the original designations given by the predecessors. This ancient race had mapped most of the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing thousands of years ago. Zixthala entered the spatial coordinates for the human homeworld. Sol 3, third planet from a yellow star in the outer spiral arm. The translation matrix hummed to life, searching through layers of ancient data that predated most current civilizations. She expected to see a simple confirmation. Perhaps the ancient name would translate to something like Blue World or Life Garden, as was common for inhabited planets. The predecessors had been practical in their naming conventions, usually describing a world's most obvious features. The screen flickered. Lines of ancient text appeared, symbols that few beings in the current galaxy could read without computer assistance. The translation matrix worked slowly, parsing meaning from a language that was older than written history for most species. Zixthala watched the symbols change, reshape and resolve into modern galactic standard. When the translation completed, she stared at the result for several long moments. Her breathing apparatus made a harsh whistling sound as she fought to process what she was seeing. The ancient name for the human homeworld was not Earth or Terra or anything remotely pleasant. The symbols formed words that made her scales stand on end. Kithmala Vexanthara Quad High. In modern translation, this meant roughly the forge where nightmares are born, or birth world of the endless hunger. Zixthala checked her work 3 times. She ran the coordinates again. She verified the translation matrix calibration. Every result was the same. The homeworld of the friendly, curious humans carried one of the most terrifying designations in the entire ancient archive. Her hands trembled as she accessed the restricted files associated with that designation. Most archives of this age required special clearance, but as chief archivist, Zixthala had access to nearly everything. What she found in those files made her question everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. The predecessors had left detailed warnings about this world. Not just simple cautions, but desperate pleas for future civilizations to avoid the entire system. The record spoke of a planet where evolution had taken a twisted path, where the dominant species had turned survival into something monstrous. According to the files, the beings from this world did not simply fight for resources or territory like normal species. They weaponized everything around them. Their environment, their biology, their social structures, even their capacity for learning had all become tools for an endless cycle of conflict and improvement. The predecessors described creatures that could adapt to any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and turn every disadvantage into strength. They did not wage war like civilized beings with rules and honor. They perfected warfare into an art form that consumed everything in its path. Most terrifying of all, these beings seemed to thrive on adversity. Where other species would be broken by hardship, they grew stronger. Where others would seek peace and stability, they created new challenges for themselves. Zixthala's workstation chimed with an incoming priority message. Her supervisor, Archive Master Velthon, appeared on the communication screen. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of concern. Zixthala, I have received an unusual data request from the Security Council. They want immediate verification of all human-related files in the ancient archive. They marked it as highest priority. Do you know anything about this? She looked at the damning evidence still glowing on her screen. I believe I may have triggered their interest, Archive Master. I was conducting routine verification of human homeworld designation when I discovered something unexpected. Velthon's expression grew serious. Transmit your findings immediately. And Zixthala, place a security lock on all related files until further notice. As she compiled her report, Zixthala watched the human delegation through her office window. They were gathered in the central plaza, talking animatedly with representatives from several other species. Ambassador Sarah Chen was gesturing enthusiastically as she described some aspect of human culture to a group of fascinated Altarians. They looked so normal, so harmless. Sarah Chen was a small woman by human standards, barely reaching the shoulder of most other species representatives. Her companion, Dr. James Morrison, was currently showing a group of young alien visitors some pictures of Earth's wildlife on his portable display device. How could these beings be the descendants of the nightmare creatures described in the ancient files? How could their peaceful green world be the same planet that had terrified the predecessors into fleeing the galaxy? But as Zixthala watched more carefully, she began to notice things that had seemed normal before. The way humans moved with casual confidence through spaces that made other species nervous. How they asked questions that pushed boundaries other civilizations had learned to respect. Their tendency to see every problem as something that could be solved rather than something to be endured. She remembered a recent incident when the environmental systems in Section C had failed. While other species had evacuated and waited for repair crews, the human delegation had immediately begun analyzing the problem and proposing solutions. They had seemed genuinely confused when told that such matters were handled by specialists. Within an hour of submitting her report, Zixthala's peaceful workday exploded into chaos. Security personnel arrived to escort her to an emergency briefing. The corridors of Convergence Prime buzzed with unusual activity as word of her discovery spread through the administrative levels. In the high-security briefing room, she found herself facing the most serious gathering she had ever seen. Representatives from the Security Council, the Ancient Studies Department, and several species intelligence services all wanted to hear her report in person. As she explained her findings, she watched the faces around the table grow increasingly pale, gray or whatever color indicated fear in their respective species. The implications of her discovery were becoming clear to everyone present. The humans were not just another young species learning to take their place in galactic civilization. They were the direct descendants of the most terrifying beings the predecessors had ever encountered. And for 37 cycles, the Council had been hosting them, trading with them, and welcoming them into the heart of galactic society. The meeting ended with orders for absolute secrecy, while the Council decided how to handle this revelation. As Zixthala returned to her office, she noticed that security teams had quietly taken positions throughout the areas where humans typically gathered. The galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict, and it had all started with a simple routine verification that should have taken 5 minutes to complete. Ambassador Sarah Chen noticed the change immediately when she entered the council chambers for the morning session. The usual friendly chatter between different species had been replaced by uncomfortable silence. Representatives who normally greeted her with warm gestures now avoided eye contact entirely. The Altarian delegation, who had shared breakfast with the human team just yesterday, had moved their seats to the far side of the chamber. Even the Peaceful Harmony Collective, known for their welcoming nature toward all species, seemed to shrink away when she passed. "Something's wrong," Dr. James Morrison whispered to her as they took their assigned seats. "Look at the security detail." Sarah glanced around discreetly and saw what he meant. The usual minimal security presence had been tripled. Armed guards from several different species stood at positions that would allow them to respond quickly to any disturbance. Their weapons were not drawn, but their hands rested ready near their holsters. The session began with High Counselor Threshnall calling for order. The ancient Kaith Mori leader's forearms gestured formally as he addressed the assembly. but his usual commanding presence seemed strained. "Honored representatives," Threshnall began, his deep voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. "We have called this emergency session to address a matter of grave importance that has come to the Council's attention." Sarah exchanged worried glances with her team. Emergency sessions were rare and usually involved threats to galactic security or major diplomatic crises. She could not think of anything the human delegation had done that might warrant such attention. "Through routine archival verification, we have discovered information that changes our understanding of one of our member species," Threshnall continued. "The species known as humans possess a history that predates their membership in this council by many thousands of years." The chamber erupted in nervous murmurs. Several representatives turned to stare directly at the human delegation. Sarah felt her stomach tighten as she realized they were the subject of this emergency session. Threshnall raised one of his 4 hands for silence. "I will now call upon Archive Master Velthon to present the findings of the Ancient Studies Department." The elderly Velthiari archivist approached the central podium with obvious reluctance. His usually steady gait seemed hesitant, and his speaking voice lacked its normal confidence. "Honored representatives," Velthon began, "yesterday we discovered that the human homeworld appears in the predecessor archives under a designation that has not been spoken in this chamber for over 10,000 years. He activated the chamber's main display. Ancient symbols appeared in the air above the assembled delegates, slowly rotating to show their complex structure. The predecessor designation for the human homeworld translates to Kethmala Vexanthara Quadhai, the forge where nightmares are born, or birthworld of the endless hunger. The reaction was immediate and intense. Several delegates gasped audibly. The representative from the Peaceful Gardens Collective actually fainted and had to be attended by medical personnel. Others began speaking rapidly in their native languages, clearly agitated. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She had studied galactic history and knew enough about the predecessors to understand the implications. The predecessors had been the galaxy's dominant civilization before mysteriously vanishing. If they had given Earth such a terrifying name, there had to be a reason. Velthon continued his presentation, his voice growing smaller with each revelation. The archive contains detailed warnings about this world and its dominant species. The predecessors described beings that had weaponized the concept of evolution itself. The ancient files appeared on the display, translated into modern galactic standard. Sarah read with growing horror as the predecessors described her species' ancestors in terms that made them sound like galactic monsters. According to the records, early humans had not simply competed for survival like normal species. They had turned every aspect of their existence into a tool for gaining advantage over their environment and each other. They weaponized their social structures, their technology, their biology, and even their capacity for learning. The predecessors had been particularly disturbed by humanity's relationship with conflict. Where most species sought to avoid or minimize warfare, humans had refined it into an art form. They studied it, perfected it, and used it to drive technological and social advancement. Most troubling, Velthon read from the ancient files, these beings appear to thrive on adversity. Challenges that would destroy other species only make them stronger and more determined. They do not seek peaceful coexistence with their environment. They seek to dominate and reshape it to their will. The final section of the predecessor files contained their most dire warnings. They described a species that would not be content to remain on their homeworld. These beings would spread across the galaxy, adapting to every environment they encountered and changing it to suit their needs. The predecessors concluded, Velthon said, his voice barely above a whisper, that coexistence with this species was impossible. They recommended that all civilized beings avoid contact with this world and its inhabitants at any cost. When the presentation ended, the chamber fell into complete silence. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat and the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. Every eye in the room was focused on the human delegation. High Counselor Threshnall finally spoke. Ambassador Chen, the Council would appreciate your response to these revelations. Sarah stood slowly, her mind racing. She looked around the chamber at faces filled with fear, suspicion, and barely contained panic. These beings had welcomed humans into their community for over 30 years. And now they were learning that humanity carried the galaxy's most terrifying reputation. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I understand your concern. These records paint a frightening picture of my species' ancestors, but I ask you to consider what you have observed of humanity during our time as council members." She gestured toward her small delegation. "We have participated in hundreds of diplomatic sessions. We have honored our treaties and commitments. We have contributed to galactic prosperity and security. We have made friends among many of your species." Dr. Morrison stood beside her. "If we were the monsters described in those ancient files, would we not have revealed our true nature by now? Would we be sitting here as equals, participating in democratic discourse?" But Sarah could see that their words were having little effect. The fear in the chamber was too deep, too primal. These beings were looking at humans through the lens of ancient terror, reinterpreting every interaction through that dark perspective. Elder Cathera of the Harmony Collective spoke for the first time. Her melodious voice carried centuries of wisdom but also deep concern. "Ambassador Chen, we do not doubt your sincerity or that of your delegation. But consider this from our perspective. For 10,000 years, we have built a galaxy based on cooperation and peaceful coexistence. We have achieved this by avoiding the very traits that made your ancestors so terrifying." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your species possesses a drive for constant improvement and expansion that our civilizations have learned to suppress in ourselves. We have chosen stability over growth, contentment over ambition. These choices have given us peace, but they have also made us vulnerable to any species that retain those ancient drives." The weight of her words settled over the chamber. Sarah realized that the fear was not just about what humans had been, but about what they represented. Humanity embodied everything these civilizations had deliberately chosen to abandon in their pursuit of galactic peace. As the session ended, Sarah watched the other delegates file out, many casting fearful glances at the human delegation. Security personnel remained in position, making it clear that the humans were now under discreet but constant surveillance. Walking back to their quarters, Dr. Morrison spoke quietly. "Sarah, I think we need to prepare for the possibility that our membership in the council may be in serious jeopardy." Sarah nodded grimly. The revelation of Earth's ancient name had done more than just reveal historical information. It had awakened fears that had slept for 10,000 years and forced the galaxy to confront the question of whether peaceful coexistence with humanity was possible or desirable. The friendly galaxy that had welcomed them with curiosity and warmth now looked at them with the ancient terror of prey animals who had suddenly realized they had been living alongside predators. The news leaked within 48 hours. Despite the Council's efforts to maintain secrecy, information about Earth's true name spread through the galaxy's communication networks like wildfire. Emergency diplomatic pouches carried the news to homeworlds across known space. Trade ship captains whispered the story in busy spaceports. Within a week, every major civilization in the galaxy knew that the friendly humans were descendants of the nightmare. Species that had terrified the predecessors into abandoning the galaxy. Commander Zekmar of the Altarian Defense Force received the classified briefing while his ship patrolled the outer borders of Altarian space. He read the report 3 times before fully accepting its contents. The peaceful species that his people had welcomed as trading partners in cultural exchange. Participants were the direct descendants of beings so terrifying that the ancient predecessors had fled rather than face them. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving priority messages from the homeworld. Fleet Command is ordering all ships to avoid human space until further notice." Zekmar looked at the star charts displayed on his bridge screens. 3 major trade routes passed through or near human territory. These routes had been profitable for Altarian merchants for over 30 years. Now they were being abandoned out of fear. "Plot a course around human space," he ordered, "and send a message to any Altarian vessels in that region. They are to complete their business and depart immediately." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Mechanics Prime, the Peaceful Builders Guild held an emergency session to discuss their extensive contracts with human colonies. The humans had proven to be excellent customers, always eager to learn new construction techniques and adapt them to their own needs. But that's exactly what makes them dangerous, Guildmaster Teclon explained to the worried assembly. "They don't just use our techniques. They improve them. They take our designs and make them better, faster, more efficient. What we saw as healthy curiosity was actually the same drive that made their ancestors so terrifying. The guild voted to suspend all new contracts with human worlds and to gradually withdraw from existing projects. Similar decisions were being made by organizations across the galaxy. On the ancient world of the Harmony Collective, the Council of Elders gathered in their sacred grove to discuss the crisis. For 6,000 years, their people had not even possessed a military force. They had achieved perfect peace through careful cooperation and mutual understanding with their neighbors. Elder Solana, oldest of their kind, spoke with the weight of centuries. The humans have never threatened us directly. They have been courteous neighbors and fair trading partners, but the ancient warnings cannot be ignored. Elder Vexhai, younger but still ancient by human standards, expressed the fear that gripped many hearts. Their courtesy may simply be the calm before the storm. The predecessors described beings who could adapt their behavior to any situation. What if their peaceful nature is simply another adaptation, a tool they use until they are ready to reveal their true purpose? The collective voted to begin construction of defensive installations for the first time in their recorded history. The irony was not lost on them. In their fear of human aggression, they were abandoning the very principles that had made them peaceful. But perhaps nowhere was the panic more intense than among the Kethmori warrior clans. These proud beings had considered themselves the galaxy's premier fighters for thousands of years. Their military traditions and combat prowess were legendary. They served as peacekeepers and protectors for many smaller civilizations. War leader Gorthek studied the ancient files in his fortress on the clan homeworld. His advisors waited nervously as he read the predecessors' descriptions of human warfare capabilities. "They fight without honor," he growled, his forearms gesturing angrily. "They use deception, adaptation, and innovation instead of strength and courage. They turn every disadvantage into an advantage. They do not simply defeat enemies. They learn from every conflict and become stronger." His senior lieutenant, Korthek, spoke carefully. "War leader, our intelligence suggests that humans have not fought a major war in over 2 centuries. Perhaps they have evolved beyond their warrior nature." Gorthek slammed one massive fist on the table. "Or perhaps they have simply been waiting, building strength, learning our weaknesses while we grew comfortable and complacent." The Kethmori began the largest military mobilization in their recent history. Ancient war fleets were pulled from reserve status and positioned along their borders. For the first time in living memory, the warrior clans felt genuinely afraid. Meanwhile, humanity remained largely unaware of the growing panic. Human colonies continued their normal activities. Their trade ships maintained regular schedules, and their exploration vessels pushed deeper into uncharted space, with the same cheerful determination that had always marked their species. Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the human cargo vessel Determined Progress noticed something odd when she arrived at Kethro Station for a routine supply run. The usually busy trading post seemed unusually quiet, and many of the docking bays that normally hosted ships from various species were empty. "That's strange," she commented to her first officer. "Usually we have to wait in line for a docking slot here." When they attempted to conduct normal trade negotiations, they found the station's merchants reluctant to engage. Prices for human goods had mysteriously increased, while prices for goods humans wanted to purchase had become unreasonably expensive. "I don't understand it," Rodriguez told her crew. "It's like they don't want to trade with us anymore." Similar experiences were reported by human traders across the galaxy. Business relationships that had been stable for decades suddenly became difficult or impossible to maintain. Human diplomatic missions found themselves canceled or postponed without explanation. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a human xenobiologist working at the Galactic Research Institute, began noticing changes in her alien colleagues' behavior. Scientists who had collaborated with her for years suddenly became distant and formal. Her access to certain research projects was quietly revoked. "I don't know what's happening," she confided to her human assistant, Dr. Park. "It's as if everyone is afraid to associate with us." The fear was not entirely irrational. As news of Earth's true name spread, many civilizations began reinterpreting human actions through the lens of ancient terror. Every human achievement was viewed as evidence of their dangerous nature. When human engineers helped repair a damaged space elevator on New Thessia, some observers saw it as reconnaissance for future conquest. When human doctors successfully treated a plague that had devastated the agricultural world of green fields, paranoid voices suggested it was a demonstration of biological warfare capabilities. The University of Galactic Sciences held an emergency conference to discuss the human question. Professor Velthanor, a respected expert on galactic history, presented a paper that sent shockwaves through the academic community. Consider the evidence, he argued. In less than 4 decades of galactic membership, humans have established colonies on 17 different worlds. They have adapted to environments that would challenge most other species. They have improved nearly every technology they have encountered. He displayed charts showing human population growth, technological advancement, and territorial expansion. If we project these trends forward, humans will become the dominant species in this galaxy within a few centuries. Not through conquest, but simply through their relentless drive to grow and improve. The conference ended with calls for immediate action to contain human expansion before it was too late. Back on Convergence Prime, Ambassador Sarah Chen found herself effectively isolated. The human delegation's quarters were under constant surveillance. Their movements were restricted to certain areas of the station. Other species representatives avoided them entirely. "We're being treated like dangerous animals," Dr. Morrison observed during one of their private meetings. Dangerous animals that might explode at any moment. Sarah stared out the viewport at the stars that had once seemed full of friendly possibilities. "James, I think we need to face the possibility that our peaceful integration into galactic society is over. The question now is whether we can prevent this fear from turning into something much worse." Unknown to the human delegation, that question was already being debated in secret sessions of the Security Council. Some members argued for immediate quarantine of all human worlds. Others suggested more drastic measures. The galaxy that had welcomed humanity with curiosity and friendship was rapidly transforming into something else entirely. Ancient fears were awakening, and the peaceful cooperation that had defined galactic civilization for thousands of years was beginning to crumble. Children of the nightmare world were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous thing about having a terrifying reputation is that people might decide to act on their fear before you have a chance to prove them wrong. Professor Yithandra had devoted her entire career to studying the predecessors. As the galaxy's leading expert on the ancient civilization, she had spent over 40 years analyzing their technology, culture, and mysterious disappearance. When the Security Council asked her to lead a comprehensive investigation into the human question, she accepted with both excitement and dread. Her team included representatives from 12 different species, each bringing their own expertise to the investigation. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human xenobiologist, had been reluctantly included, despite many objections from Council, members who questioned the wisdom of allowing humans to investigate themselves. The investigation team gathered in a secure facility on Convergence Prime, surrounded by the most complete collection of predecessor artifacts and records in the galaxy. Their mission was simple in concept but complex in execution: determine the true nature of the threat that humans might represent. "We must approach this with scientific objectivity," Professor Yithandra announced to her team during their first meeting. "Our personal fears and biases cannot influence our findings. We are seeking truth, not confirmation of our suspicions." Dr. Klenther, a respected historian from the ancient archives world, raised one of his tentacles in question. "Professor, with respect, how can we maintain objectivity when we are investigating a species that may pose an existential threat to galactic civilization?" "Because," Yithandra replied firmly, "if we allow fear to guide our investigation, we will learn nothing useful. We will only confirm what we already believe." The team began by studying the original predecessor records in greater detail than had been attempted in centuries. Using advanced translation algorithms and archaeological analysis, they worked to understand not just what the predecessors had written, but why they had written it. Dr. Vasquez proved invaluable in this process. Her human perspective allowed her to interpret descriptions of human behavior that confused the alien team members. More importantly, her scientific training helped her remain objective even when the records painted her own species in terrifying terms. "Look at this passage," she said during their third day of analysis. "The predecessors describe humans as beings who consume challenges. But what does that actually mean?" Dr. Zixthanar, a philosopher from the contemplation worlds, studied the ancient text carefully. It suggests that your species actively seeks out difficulties rather than avoiding them. Most civilized beings work to minimize problems in their lives. But seeking challenges isn't necessarily destructive, Dr. Vasquez pointed out. Scientists seek challenging problems to solve. Artists seek challenging expressions to create. Athletes seek challenging competitions to test themselves. This observation led to a breakthrough in their understanding. The team began to realize that the predecessors might have been describing human behavior accurately, but interpreting it through their own cultural assumptions about what such behavior meant. Professor Yathandra made the crucial connection while reviewing predecessor records about their own society. Team, I believe we have been approaching this investigation from the wrong angle. We have been trying to understand what made humans dangerous to the predecessors. We should be asking what made the predecessors vulnerable to humans. The answer, when it emerged, was both simple and profound. The predecessors had achieved their advanced civilization by reaching a state of perfect equilibrium. They had solved the problems of resource scarcity, territorial conflict, and social inequality. Their society was stable, peaceful, and efficient, but that stability had come at a cost. The predecessors had essentially stopped evolving. They had reached what they considered the ideal state of existence and had structured their entire civilization around maintaining that state unchanged. They had achieved perfection, Dr. Clenthor realized, and perfection cannot improve itself without ceasing to be perfect. Humans represented something the predecessors had never encountered, a species that treated perfection as just another problem to be solved. Where the predecessors saw completion, humans saw a starting point for the next challenge. The investigation team studied human history and behavior patterns with new understanding. They saw that humans did indeed possess the traits the predecessors had described, but these traits were not inherently malicious or destructive. Dr. Vasquez provided crucial insights into human psychology. We don't adapt to our environment to dominate it, she explained. We adapt to it so we can understand it better. Understanding leads to improvement, which leads to new challenges, which leads to more adaptation. The team's linguist, Mel Thara, made another important discovery while studying the ancient language used in the predecessor warnings. The word we translated as consume doesn't necessarily mean destroy, she announced. In the original predecessor language, it can also mean incorporate or internalize. This revelation cast the ancient warnings in an entirely different light. The predecessors had not been describing humans as destroyers of challenges, but as beings who internalize challenges, making them part of their essential nature. They don't fight problems, Professor Yathandra summarized. They absorb them and use them to become stronger. The most disturbing realization came when they studied predecessor records about their final years. The ancient civilization had not been destroyed by external enemies or natural disasters. They had simply stopped growing, stopped changing, and eventually stopped existing. They achieved everything they wanted to achieve, Dr. Vasquez observed, and then they had nothing left to do. The investigation team's final breakthrough came when they analyzed the actual reasons for the predecessors' fear of humanity. The ancient records revealed that the predecessors had not been afraid of human malice or aggression. They had been afraid of human potential. They had realized that if humans were allowed to develop and spread throughout the galaxy, they would not destroy existing civilizations. They would simply outlive them. Every challenge that drove other species to stagnation or extinction would only make humanity stronger and more adaptable. The predecessors had seen their own future in humanity's present. They had recognized that their perfect, stable civilization could not compete with a species that treated stability as just another problem to be solved. The horror, Dr. Clenthor said quietly, was not that humans would conquer the galaxy through warfare. It was that they would inherit it through persistence. Dr. Vasquez presented the team's most significant finding during their final session. Every other species in the galaxy, including the predecessors, evolved to fit their environment. Humans evolved to change their environment to fit them. That's not evil or destructive. It's just different. Professor Yathandra compiled their findings into a comprehensive report that would shake the foundations of galactic understanding. The investigation had revealed that the ancient warnings about humanity were accurate, but incomplete. Humans were indeed the species described in the predecessor records, but the threat they represented was not the one the galaxy had feared. The real danger, Yathandra concluded in her report, is not that humans will destroy galactic civilization. The danger is that they will surpass it. They will continue to grow and adapt and improve while the rest of us remain static, until we become irrelevant through our own choice to stop evolving. The report's most controversial conclusion was its recommendation for how the galaxy should respond to the human presence. Instead of trying to contain or eliminate humanity, Yathandra's team suggested that other species should learn from humans how to rediscover their own capacity for growth and adaptation. The choice before us, the report stated, is not whether to fight humanity or surrender to them. The choice is whether to compete with them or fade away through our own stagnation. When the report was presented to the Security Council, it created a fierce debate that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Some members argued that the investigation had only confirmed their worst fears about human potential. Others began to see humanity's drive for improvement as exactly what their own stagnating civilizations needed. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, forced to choose between the comfortable stability they had known for thousands of years and the uncertain but dynamic future that humanity represented. The investigation had revealed the truth about the ancient warnings, but understanding the truth and knowing how to respond to it were very different challenges. The Security Council chamber had never seen such tension. Representatives from every major galactic civilization crowded into the space, their various forms of seating and environmental requirements creating a chaotic mixture of technologies and atmospheres. The release of Professor Yathandra's investigation report had forced this emergency session, and every species wanted their voice heard in the debate that would determine humanity's fate. War leader Gorthek of the Keth Mori stood at the speaker's podium, his four massive arms gesturing emphatically as he addressed the assembly. "The investigation confirms our worst fears," he declared. "Humans are exactly what the predecessors warned us about. They are not content with their place in the galaxy. They will not stop growing, expanding, improving until they have consumed everything around them." His words resonated with many in the chamber. The fear that had gripped the galaxy over the past weeks had not diminished with understanding. If anything, knowing that the ancient warnings were accurate had made the fear worse. "We have two choices," Gorthek continued. "We can act now, while we still have the advantage of numbers and preparation, or we can wait until humanity's inevitable expansion makes resistance impossible." Elder Solana of the Harmony Collective responded from her delegation's area. Her melodic voice carried clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "War leader Gorthek speaks of acting against a species that has committed no crimes except being what they are. This is not justice. This is genocide born from fear. And what alternative do you propose?" demanded Representative Vextilar from the Industrial Consortium. "Do we simply wait and hope that humanity will be content to coexist peacefully while they inevitably surpass every other civilization in the galaxy?" Ambassador Sarah Chen had been granted permission to address the council, though she knew that many members would prefer not to hear from humanity at all. As she approached the speaker's podium, she could feel the weight of hundreds of alien gazes upon her. The decision made in this chamber would determine whether humanity had a future in galactic civilization or would face isolation, containment, or worse. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I stand before you not as a representative of the nightmare species described in ancient warnings, but as a human being who has spent the last 37 years of her life working for peace and cooperation among our peoples." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces filled with fear, anger, and uncertainty. "Yes, humans are driven to grow and improve. Yes, we adapt to challenges rather than avoiding them. Yes, we change our environment instead of simply accepting it. But these traits have led us to join your galactic community, not to conquer it." Dr. James Morrison joined her at the podium. "For over 3 decades, humanity has been part of this council. We have honored our treaties, contributed to galactic prosperity, and made friends among your peoples. If we were the monsters described in those ancient files, would we not have revealed our true nature by now?" But Sarah could see that their words alone would not be enough. The fear ran too deep, and the logic of the investigation's findings was too compelling. Humanity's potential for growth was real, and other species' fears about being left behind were justified. "I want to tell you a story," Sarah said, changing her approach. On Earth, there was once a species of large, powerful predators called wolves. Humans encountered these creatures and could have driven them to extinction. Instead, we adapted both ourselves and the wolves. We created a partnership that benefited both species. Those wolves became dogs, humanity's oldest and most loyal companions. She gestured toward the assembled delegates. Humans have been adapting to galactic civilization for 37 years. In that time, we have not remained the same species that the predecessors feared. We have learned cooperation, diplomacy, and mutual respect. We have become something new. Professor Yathandra was granted permission to address the council as the lead investigator. Her presence at the podium commanded immediate respect from all present. The investigation has revealed that the choice before us is not between safety and danger, she announced. It is between growth and stagnation. The predecessors chose stagnation and eventually ceased to exist. Humanity chose growth and survived to join us here today. She activated the chamber's display system, showing comparative charts of civilizational development over the past few thousand years. Every species in this chamber has reached a plateau in their development. We have achieved peace and stability by avoiding the challenges that drive change, but this stability is also a trap. The chart showed declining birth rates, reduced technological innovation, and cultural stagnation across most galactic civilizations. We are all slowly following the path of the predecessors, whether we realize it or not. Elder Cathera of the Harmony Collective spoke from her position. Professor, are you suggesting that we should abandon our peaceful ways and embrace the chaos of constant change? No, Yathandra replied. I am suggesting that we learn from humanity how to grow without losing our essential values. How to adapt without abandoning what makes us who we are. The debate continued for hours. Some species demanded immediate action against humanity. Others argued for isolation and containment. A few began to express interest in the possibilities that cooperation with humanity might offer. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human xenobiologist who had participated in the investigation, was granted permission to speak as both a scientist and a human. You are afraid that humanity will surpass you, she said simply. You are right to be afraid because that is exactly what will happen if nothing changes. But it doesn't have to be a disaster. She looked around the chamber with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years studying galactic civilizations. The fear you feel about humanity's potential is the same fear your ancestors felt when they chose stability over growth. You have the power to make a different choice. Every species here has capabilities that humans lack. You have achieved forms of peace, cooperation, and understanding that we are still learning. If you choose to compete with humanity instead of hiding from us, you will discover strengths you had forgotten you possessed. The final speaker was High Counselor Threshanal himself. The ancient Kethamori leader had remained silent throughout the debate, but his words would carry enormous weight with the assembly. I have lived through many crises in my long life, he began, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. I have seen the galaxy choose peace over war, cooperation over competition, stability over chaos. These choices have given us thousands of years of prosperity. He paused, his forearms moving in a gesture that conveyed deep thought. But I have also watched our civilizations slowly lose the vitality that once made them great. We have achieved peace by avoiding challenges, not by overcoming them. Threshanal turned to look directly at the human delegation. The humans represent a choice we must make. We can try to eliminate them out of fear, and in doing so abandon every principle that has guided galactic civilization. We can isolate them and wait for our own inevitable decline. Or we can accept the challenge they represent and rediscover our own capacity for growth. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had expected. The proposal to take military action against humanity was defeated by a narrow margin. The proposal for complete isolation received more support, but also failed to achieve the necessary consensus. The measure that passed established a new framework for galactic civilization. Humanity would remain a member of the Council, but under new protocols designed to manage their expansion and share their adaptive capabilities with other species. The agreement included provisions for cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives, and carefully monitored cooperation on challenging projects that would push other species out of their comfortable stagnation. Ambassador Chen signed the accord on behalf of humanity with mixed emotions. They had avoided catastrophe, but at the cost of accepting permanent scrutiny and limitations on their freedom to grow. "It's not perfect," Dr. Morrison observed as they returned to their quarters, "but it's a beginning." Sarah nodded, looking out at the stars that surrounded Convergence Prime. "James, I think we just witnessed the birth of something entirely new. A galactic civilization that chooses to grow instead of just endure." Over the following months, the new protocols were implemented across the galaxy. Human advisors began working with other species on projects designed to challenge them in controlled ways. Alien scientists joined human research teams to study their methods of adaptation and innovation. The results were remarkable. Species that had remained unchanged for centuries began developing new technologies, exploring new ideas, and rediscovering their own capacity for growth. The galaxy started to feel more alive, more dynamic than it had in thousands of years. Not every species chose to participate in the new programs. Some remained committed to their peaceful isolation, and their choice was respected. But enough civilizations embraced the challenge of competing with humanity to create a new kind of galactic society. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.